What the San Francisco 49ers have done is so good that ESPN has just put the league on notice. And I can't wait to break it down with you. But a collection of contributors from ESPN outlined each team ahead of the 2024 season. And I just got so hyped. I just was reading through it and I was like, we got to talk about this. So I've highlighted some key things that we should talk about, big storylines, that kind of thing. But what I love about it is the strengths for the San Francisco 49ers are awesome as to be expected. And the weaknesses for the 49ers, I feel like for the most part, aren't really that bad. And I'll tell you why as we get into it. By the end of the show, I'm hoping that you're going to be feeling really hyped about this upcoming season, if you're not already, because this is such an incredible opportunity for a group of guys that are so lucky to have each other. The team that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have put together is really quite special, and I can't wait to break this down with you and all season long. While we're talking about that, make sure you're subscribed because you don't want to miss out on all of the fun. So ESPN has, I'm just going to jump straight in here. ESPN has the 49ers, the highest ranked team in the NFL. No surprise there. You don't have to go far to find team number one. And they use the FPI rankings and all that stuff. I'm not going to bother or bore going into all of that. But as we go through it, I'm just going to encourage you, comment below what has you most hyped as we read through this. Like, what is the thing that you're like, I want to run through a wall for this football team? Because there are moments when I'm reading this, that's how I feel. I'm that hyped as I look at it. Football is backed. What has you hyped about this season? Here we go. So to kick us off here, firstly, ranked number one overall. I already said that. Chances to win the division, 67.9%, which if you look at even some of the best teams in the league, this is a pretty strong statement, right? Like you look down at the Kansas City Chiefs, they have a 74%. These are a couple teams that have ridiculously high percentage chances of winning their division, because you have to remember all of the other factors that go into play with a team wanting to win their division. For example, Baltimore Ravens, tough division, 46%. This is an amazing team. They're the number 3 ranked team, 46%. So just to put it in context for you, that's a big statement to be a 70% chance win. That's awesome. Chance to make the playoffs, 85.6%. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by that. Projected wins at 11. And strength of schedule at 11 hardest. To be the number 1 ranked team and to be 11th hardest strength of schedule, that's a good thing. We've talked about that before, so I won't go too deep on it. Overall, this is all great. And while we're talking about those percentages, chance to win the division, chance to win the playoffs, let's just compare real quick for the NFC West. And I'm going to break down the rest of the NFC West later in another video, maybe later today. But we have a 67.9% chance to win the division compared to Los Angeles Rams has an 18% chance to win the division. There's a lot of people out there talking really high about the Rams right now and how good they are. And I'm just like, hey, it's in the math, guys. It's in the math. Just trust the math. We only trust the statistics when it works to our advantage, right, guys? Then you had the Seattle Seahawks. They have an 8.8% chance of winning the division, and the Arizona Cardinals have a 5% chance to win the division. So the 49ers, 67.9% chance compared to 18% for the Rams, 8% for the Seahawks, and 5% for the Cardinals. Now, chance to make the playoffs, okay? Chance to make the playoffs, 85.6%, as you can see here for the 49ers, compared to Los Angeles Rams at a 47% chance to win the playoffs. You know, all of the stuff that I hear about how good the Rams are, and they don't even have a 50-50 shot of making the playoffs. That's strong. Those are strong statements right there. That's pretty wild. That one, honestly, I'm just being honest, that surprised me. And the NFC West is strong. So I understand it. I can convince myself of why that makes sense. But for some reason, you know, when you look at all these teams like by themselves, you can convince yourselves that they're a really good team. And they are. The Rams are a good team. They're going to be the toughest division opponent for sure. Seattle Seahawks, by the way, have a 29% chance of making the playoffs, and the Cardinals have a 19% chance of making the playoffs. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do a deeper dive into the NFC West picture as a whole because I think it's pretty fascinating. But let's go down to the biggest strength. No surprises here. The biggest strength of the 49ers is the roster and the fact that the majority of the roster on offensive side of the ball is returning. And that's good. We should be excited about that. It says technically they have the potential for all 11 starters to play. And that's not going to happen. That's unlikely to happen as long as Dominic Puni is healthy, for instance, as long as Trent Williams signs, for instance. This is all technically possible here, but it's probably unlikely to happen. Their offense was number 1 in points per game, efficiency, and EPA. Could still improve because it finally has stability at quarterback with Brock Purdy for a full season. And I want to give some massive credit to Nick Wagner here for representing the ESPN writers. They're ESPN writers all over this page. Like, it's people from all over the country, right? And I want to give Nick Wagner some credit here for making sure that he's going out there and making sure that the national world knows that that Brock Purdy can improve this offense. He still has a chance to improve this offense. And I love it. Absolutely love it. Biggest concern. This is interesting here. So biggest concern is overall depth. The Niners were hit hard by preseason injuries, but a few ones affecting key players appear to be long-term. So even, this is great. Even when Nick Wagner's trying to poke holes in the 49ers, he can't help himself, but caveat, yeah, but all those injuries, I mean, none of them are really long-term, right? Obviously not none of them. Elijah Mitchell, long-term. There are some long-terms, but I love this here that, like, Nick Wagner can't even help himself when he's trying to point out the negative, but, there's a caveat though, right? And the thing I'll just say about this, when you talk about depth for what, right? What would we have had to do in the draft to get depth at offensive tackle? Right? It would have cost us something. So I just want to keep that in perspective. Any depth we would have had that we would have liked to have in other positions, like on the defensive line or on the offensive line, would have cost us something. And I have to just trust the organization. I'm going to encourage you to trust the organization here. They're doing the best they can to have the best squad available, right? And they're making decisions that mean that we have such an incredible offensive skill position grouping, right? So I'm going to throw that out there. You can disagree with me. Let me know in the comments. No problem there. I'm more than happy to see your perspective, and I love the back and forth that happens. It's all in good fun in sports talk world. So I love, though, that as you talk about injuries, right? When you're talking about any team in the NFL, all 32 teams in the NFL, anybody you could point out and say, well, their biggest concern this year is going to be injuries. If guys get injured, that could be a problem. And every single team could say the same thing. So using injury as your biggest potential weakness is a real cop-out, right? In terms of trying to find a legitimate weakness. Now, I will give credit to Nick Wagner here because I'm not saying he totally copped out here, but I'm just saying in general, whenever you're using injury as an argument for biggest concern, it's not really, yeah, of course, every single team would say the same thing. It's too easy to answer the question that way. What he did say related to depth was on offensive and defensive lines. And I will feel that. I will agree with that Wagner's absolutely right. And I want to say this, recognizing every team has weaknesses. Every single football team has weaknesses. No team is out there with no weaknesses. And so you look at your team and you say, here are what our weaknesses are. And every general manager and head coach has done the best they can to optimize for strength at every position they can afford to optimize for strength at. And there will always be positions left behind. Unfortunately for the 49ers, that's at the defensive line depth. Defensive line is pretty strong. Defensive line depth, I think the defensive line's strong. I think Malik Collins is going to help stuff the run in the middle, and I think you've got good edge rushers opposite Nick Bosa, right, with YGM and with Leonard Floyd. But on the offensive line, no argument there. You're not. It's not just depth on the offensive line. It's actual issues on the offensive line. It's actual starters that are not quite up to snuff. Now, we hope that they can grow, but we're not going to see the training camp and preseason. In my opinion, I don't think we're going to see a massive lift from last season into game one of this season just from training camp because there's so many injuries on the offensive line. You're not going to see that unit growth taking place. That's just my gut. And that's a problem we have to deal with. That's a reality we have to deal with. On the stats to know thing, basically just saying it's rare to go back to back. And it's like, okay, again, no disrespect to whoever contributed to this part of the article. I would not look at it's hard to go back to back as a reason to treat this season any differently. Yes, it's hard to get back to the big game. Okay, it's hard to get to the big game, guys. It's hard to get to the game either way. So I don't like this argument, and I hear it on ESPN, and I don't like this argument. It's kind of a dumb argument if you ask me. Well, it's really hard to go back-to-back. Yes, sure it is. It's hard to go anyways. Of course it's hard. That's the whole point. That's why you play all the way to the end of the season and try and do the hardest thing. So, whatever. And I know I'm not going to get like heated over it or anything, but I do think this is kind of, again, one of those arguments that are kind of, just not the most meaty in my opinion, because everybody's going to be hard. It's not like the Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch going to pull all the team aside and say, hey guys, here's the deal. So stats are really not in our favor this season. It's really hard after you lose the Super Bowl to go back to the Super Bowl next year. So we're actually not going to play. We're just going to forfeit. Stay healthy, train, spend a lot of time in the gym, and then next year we'll try again when the stats are more in our favor. Okay, like they're going to do that, right? So yes, it's a reality. Not trying to act like it's not, but also it's just hard. Getting to the Super Bowl is statistically difficult. It just is what it is. Fantasy sleeper candidate, wide receiver Jauan Jennings. I want to read this whole thing from Matt Bowen here. A receiver who is more than willing to do dirty work in the run game. Jennings is also a refined route runner who can produce in critical game situations. While Jennings had only 35 receptions last season, 23 of those went for first downs. If Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel were to miss time, Jennings would elevate into a volume role for Kyle Shanahan's scheme pass game. Love it. And I'm going to, caveat massively that anytime you're looking at fantasy football related projections, just take that for what it is. It's a huge grain of sand, huge grain of salt, whatever. I love the pick of how important Jauan Jennings could be to this football team. And I'm going to read through the fantasy football aspect because I am drafting today. Actually, I'm drafting later tonight, and I'm not going to be drafting Jauan Jennings. He's the type of guy that if somebody goes down and gets injured, knock on wood, we're hoping it doesn't happen. If he gets injured, then maybe he has an increased role and you want to pick him up because his value to the football team, but you're not getting any points for the blocking, right? Let's be honest. Okay, moving on down. Bold prediction. So no mention. So, okay, I forgot to throw some highlights in here. I don't know why I didn't. The 49ers middling offensive line will play catch up to them, and they fall out of the top 4 offenses in the league. That's the bold prediction, that the 49ers will fall out of the top 4 offenses in the league. As a result, the only lineman that they can feel great about is left tackle Trent Williams, and even if he carries risk, given that he's 36 years old and currently holding out. Then you've got Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and Colton McKivitz, showing weaknesses in either run or pass block win rate last season. What I don't understand here from Seth Walder is, one, where's Dominic Pooney in there, right? Are you working on old data or what? I don't really understand why you're bringing up Spencer Burford in there, right? Who he himself is fighting for that right guard position at the start of training camp, right? And I mean, I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing here, but I think the criticism overall is 100% fair. But I don't really understand how you kind of paint this entire picture without throwing in a guy who's expected to be the starting right guard this season. When a rookie takes a guy's position, that says something about how good he played, because you don't throw a rookie out there willy-nilly. If it's 50-50, you'd usually take the veteran, right? So I don't really understand, that small little aspect here. And that's why I bring up the point in this from the very, very top of this video. At the very beginning, I told you that I felt like the strengths that were identified were super strong, and I'm in full agreement with them. And the weaknesses they identified, I felt like were a little lackluster. I think they could have done more, maybe. Or maybe they couldn't because there weren't enough weaknesses available. And they could just choose whatever weaknesses were available to them, and that's what they had to live with. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If you're here, legend status, you know who you are. As always, I'm super optimistic. I'm really excited to do this next video in a few seconds here. I'm going to record another one to release later today, talking about the NFC West picture from some of this and just highlighting a couple notes that I think you might find interesting as a 49ers fan. And I look forward to going every single day, 7 days until the New York Jets, and breaking down all along the way as we watch the games and just fans chatting about the 49ers. That's what we're all about here. So let me know in the comments what you're thinking about, what you're excited about. Comment whatever the heck you want. You don't have to only comment what I encourage you to comment about. Comment whatever you're interested in. As always, what a time to be alive.